Welcome back to Seriously Funny. I'm your host, Mashnor Kabir, and I'm addicted to Zaxby's. This week we talk about how to speak better. My congestion has gotten considerably better. It might still be there a little bit, so if you hear a bit of nasalness, sorry, it annoys me too. I have to hear myself talking like 78 times before you hear it one time every week. So I'm not a vocal coach, and I'm writing this script in a reasonably rushed manner. So this is going to be some advice in my experience and journey on how to speak better, because believe it or not, I didn't always speak this eloquently. You shouldn't believe it. I've spent my entire life thinking about how to speak well, so I've generally done it reasonably okay for most of my life. We'll discuss three things in this episode: stuttering, crutch words, and a brief intro on conversation, which is its own episode for another day, but I need to fill time, so we'll start that. And again, coughing. If you see random cuts, hear random cuts, I probably just broke into a coughing fit out of nowhere, so it might have happened. Once more, before we start, again, I'm not a vocal coach. This is not for people that have speech impediments. That's going to require professional help, in which case, get it, but if you have it, don't feel too insecure about it, is what it is, right? So in my script, I have written stuttering. So yeah, stuttering. This one sucks. No one likes to stutter, really, and this is one of the issues that when you can eliminate, it's generally something that you can forget. Unlike the next thing we'll talk about here in a moment, crutch words. Stuttering is, of course, getting caught on a word or phrase for a bit, like this. Your tongue or brain, I don't know, one of them gets stuck somewhere and accidentally repeats a word, unless you're doing it on purpose. Who knows? Sometimes stuttering happens when you become more emotional. So when I speak stories and I'm speaking an emotional scene, I'll stutter a bit more. So I recently wrote my own story. It's a lot more sad than the God abandoned us one. And that story has a lot of emotions in it. Yeah. Yeah. So when I narrate that one, and I haven't sat down and done the actual narration, I've just practiced the narration while my nasal was still nasally. Maybe sometime this weekend I'll do it. I have to record the Volt episode this weekend and get a bunch of homework done, so I don't know if that'll happen, but hopefully soon, that'll be out, and it'll be out on the narration channel and the narration podcast, I guess. So that won't be on this podcast. So I'm not ready to go releasing it everywhere yet, but soon. When you get emotional, you're probably going to stutter more. If you remember the God's Not Dead story from a few weeks ago, you'll notice that the main character stuttered a bit when his beliefs were being threatened and attacked. The character's identity was being threatened, so he repeated himself in order to reinforce something within his own mind. Although stuttering is generally thought of as being the constant repeating of a single syllable or character, you can go ahead and stutter on a statement as well, and it's jolly good fun. I don't know why I wrote that, but I did. In my story, I did say things like, that means I'm good, right? And I repeated that like 3 times in the story. It wasn't written that way. It was just narrated that way because I just wanted to put more emphasis on it. In that case, I guess some people would call it stuttering. Some people would just call it repeating yourself. But in general, this is seen as something you don't want to do, stuttering. And for the sake of clarity and having your words actually be conveyed, you probably don't want to stutter. It disrupts the flow of what you're saying. I've had many jokes ruined because I accidentally tripped up on one word. It happens to the best of us. And when that happens, it's usually because my brain is going really, really fast to get the words out. I have this really good joke and I just want to get the joke out. And my mouth can't keep up, so a disconnect happens that causes me to stutter or get stuck somewhere. So if you're talking, or if you're trying to talk too fast, you're going to be a bit more likely to stutter. So tip number 1 to reduce stuttering is going to be to slow down. Notice the speed that you're talking at. This is a normal speed of talking. Yes, this speed should be modulated depending on what you're saying and what you want to convey, but that's more advanced stuff in speech and rhetoric. That's another episode. Let's calm it down here, okay? For now, try to keep your speech at a steady pace. Once you master the basics, you can play around with things, e.g. the speed of which you speak. Now, the actual advice and tip I have for stuttering, and what I did to reduce my stuttering, is practicing tongue twisters. I did this in the shower when I used to practice these because I didn't want anyone to hear my practicing, but the ones I practiced were in general, for some reason. So I can I have a lot of people I've played with online. I used to play a lot more video games online before the whole college thing. I had no problem yelling into my microphone and talking with my friends online. But for some reason, if no one was in the party, I felt incredibly just not okay with speaking out loud to myself. Like no one, like when I lived with my family, like they wouldn't know if I was speaking to someone or if I wasn't speaking to someone. Obviously, they're not in the room seeing if I'm in a party with my friends or not. So it doesn't matter. But for some reason, my brain just said no. So that's why I did it in the shower. Some of the general tongue twisters I practiced, I didn't go too crazy in them. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Surely Sally shells are real. How much wood could a woodchuck check for woodchuck wood? Red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow leather, red leather, yellow feather, red leather, yellow feather, red leather, yellow feather, red leather, yellow feather. And I would start with a general, getting them said reasonably smoothly. So Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Surely Sally's shells are real. And then I would speed them up and see how fast I could say them. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. For me, I mumble a good bit and I don't enunciate all my words all the time, which is fine. For example, Sally sells seashells by the seashore. Surely Sally's shells are real. A lot of them, sometimes when it sounds like I'm not pronouncing shells all the way, that's just because I don't pronounce shells all the way in general. Like I don't really enunciate the E there. I'll kind of whoosh past the L's. So when I speak it is Sally sells seashells by the seashore, and my tongue doesn't make that much contact with the top of my mouth. So whether I'm speaking as slowly or fast, it's going to sound a bit off if you really paid attention to it. And a lot of my words, honestly, in this podcast, when I talk, if you really just pay attention to the way I speak, it sounds like, or if you pay attention to your own mouth when you speak versus what it sounds like when I speak, you'll notice my tongue is just not contacting my upper mouth very much, nor is it moving very much at all. So it causes a little bit of a smoother sound in my words, which again is fine. I'm just lazy and I generally don't want to move my tongue very much, so I don't enunciate everything. It's how I talk. I'm not here to tell you to change how you talk unless you're really just an awful pretentious sounding a-hole. You can talk however you want. Generally it's what you say that makes you annoying or not annoying, but some people really do just have that voice. But the content of your speech will matter more than how you talk, but that may be another episode. Speak clearly enough that people understand, so I am understandable, and spice it up however you want to. That's just personal preference. I tried to pick something as non-offensive as possible to decrease the likelihood that someone would have an initial averse reaction to my voice. But anyways, yeah, crutch words, like words. Yep. So crutch words are the words that our brain pull out when you're talking way faster than you're thinking, which is the opposite of stuttering. Like we said, for stuttering, your brain is going really quick and your mouth can't keep up and you get stuck. For like, etc., your mouth is going quicker than your brain, so you haven't came up with the words yet, and so you or like. Or you're like me and you just say for 30 minutes while you try to find your place in your script again. That's also completely possible. Oh, where'd I go? When you don't know what to say or you reach a pause, you hit a crutch words can also just be a habit. You hear like too much or and you say them too much because these are hard for everyone and they can change. Sometimes it really is just a phase. You'll just, for a little bit of time, you'll just get stuck on a phrase and you'll use it a lot for like a week or two. Last week or the week before that, I've been saying "got dang" a lot because that "got" G-A-W-T, not G-O-D, G-A-W-T, that pronunciation is really funny to me for some reason. I really wanted to get good at it, so I said it a lot. I'm saying it a lot less now, but at the time I was saying it reasonably. So it went away in a couple days. As for my worst crutch words, right now at least, it is "and so." So if you notice me in the podcast, I notice it myself in the podcast when I'm editing. I hear every single time that I say "and so," and it triggers me. Right now, which I say way too, that I'm not even going to continue with that joke because I failed so hard. Never mind. You've also heard me say "but yeah" in the podcast a lot, and that's me trying to find my script usually. It's also a transition, so I have a hard time with transition words because my brain for some reason doesn't agree with the fact that you can just do a period, press enter, and start another paragraph. I always have to have some stupid transition between it. But there it is again. So I say these things. And in general, crutch words suck. I really don't like it. I don't enjoy saying them. I don't enjoy catching myself say them. They're not like stuttering where you can just do practice to fix it, where I can just, Sally sells seashores. Yeah. Peter Piper pickled some peppers of pipers and wood chucked the chuck wood. So I can't do that. To stop these crutch words. So the few principle that I've learned is, again, for the uhs and ums especially, because I don't do that as much, especially not my normal speech, every now and then, but it's a lot lower than most people. The few principle that I've learned is, again, talking slower. So at the beginning, before I was able to talk at the speeds that I was able to talk at, there was a period of my speech where I talked a lot slower, and I spent more time trying to enunciate and think about my words. And if I hit an or an the general advice here is to be okay with pausing. Instead of saying or if you get lost, just pause. It makes it so your brain doesn't need to catch up if you talk slower with an or and honestly, it sounds significantly better to pause than to say just stop talking, However, if it's a crutch phrase like and so or like or but yeah or god dang, then you need to more so be aware of your speech and keep a constant focus on your own talking so that you can catch it right before you say your crutch phrase. And then you can pause and come up with some other way to connect your sentence or whatever it may be. And of course, this is a seriously funny episode. So how do you get better at focusing on your speech and being aware of what you're saying? Say it with me, kids. Meditation. Yep, that's why you listen to this podcast, to feel bad about the fact you don't meditate, even though every week you tell yourself that you should start meditating. You're welcome to your weekly reminder. Now, before we get to the conversation thing, I want to give a smaller piece of advice that I think has helped shape the way that I talk, as well as make me a better talker in general, or to some of you posh and proper people, a better speaker. Simple tip, it's reading. I read a lot of books, and if you think you can go read Twitter threads, saying the wrong word, I guess, is a different thing. If your brain doesn't want to work, your brain doesn't want to work. Not much to do there, right? But reading a Twitter thread, don't do that, okay? That's not going to help you learn how to talk better. It's going to help you learn how to be hated by everyone you open your mouth in front of. But you can read no sleep stories, probably. Although they do, oh, goodness gracious, this is what happens when you talk too fast. Although they do have typos, since they're written by people on the internet and they're not put through hired editors, as long as they aren't written with uhs and ums, which they're not. Only high schoolers write that in text. It's fine if you don't see the uhs and ums. And no sleep stories, obviously they're written with as corrective grammar as the writer can do. Of course, some things slip by in editing. Even real published books have editing mistakes here and there. Of course, in a perfect world, you just read books, right? And if you read no sleep stories and you read the dialogue between characters, if you read fictional books, if you read no sleep stories, do a great job because it's just so easy to read. It's a lot easier to do than read a book. And of course, I want to recommend that you read books. However, I know you're not going to do that. So recommending that you read a no sleep story is way more approachable and way more likely for you to do. So, rhetoric, right? You open the door to get someone in and then you push them further. That's why there's things known as gateway drugs. Don't do drugs, kids. Yep, that went down a dark path. Anyways, yeah, in a perfect world, you would just read books. Now, whether that be ebooks or real books, read published books, fiction or nonfiction, doesn't matter when it comes to speaking better. If you want to learn more words, you should probably read nonfiction, but learning more words doesn't really have to do with speaking better. It has to do with being more pretentious, which, although I do, I'm not here to condone that behavior, okay? I'm a hypocrite. I've read a lot of books. And since you read the books, I read the books out loud when I read them, the nonfiction ones, not the fiction ones. I don't read the no sleep. I read some no sleep stories out loud now because I want to practice my narration. But when I read my nonfiction books, I do read them out loud, or when I used to read my nonfiction books, I should say. Thank you, college. I read them out loud, and it would help me understand sentence structure. It would help me understand how these writers talked, spoke, wrote, whatever. And my writing style is very conversational. My writing style is written in a way that sounds like I'm talking. If you read it out loud, it would sound like a normal person talking. It wouldn't sound like it's being written. And part of that is probably because, I write scripts, right? So, in general, the most of my practice, whether it be YouTube or this podcast, I'm writing scripts. I am writing something that is meant to be spoken into a microphone, and hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm speaking it, not speaking it. Hopefully it does sound like I'm speaking it. Hopefully it doesn't sound like I'm reading it, because that's a mistake that a lot of people make. I think in general, I've done a really good job at not sounding like I read things. I speak well enough and I write well enough in my scripts that it comes out really well and super easy for me to say into a microphone and for you to understand it, hopefully understand it. I'm sure I've said things before that make no sense at all. I know I've written things before that made no god dang sense at all. There you go. I hope you enjoyed that. Now let's go to conversation. How's the weather today? Well, I can't exactly predict the future in my script, but let's go check. Sky's clear and the temperature is getting a bit colder, but it gets warmer in the afternoon. So there's like this middle ground at like 12 p.m. That's like a good temperature. Really cold in the mornings, really hot later in like 3, 4, 5 p.m. But it is what it is. So small talk. I think some people may say that they hate small talk, but I recently saw someone on the internet. I know a really good source of information, right? Just a random person on the internet. And I saw them say, what do people that hate small talk do? Hey, honey, I'm home. What do you think happens after we die? And I thought that was really funny. I thought that was hilarious. It's kind of true. I don't think there's anything wrong with small talk. I just think that there's something wrong with lying. If someone asks you how you're doing, I think answering honestly is fine. Of course, not everyone wants to hear about your life problems. So if you're going through a lot of stuff, maybe you keep some of it to yourself. But I don't think there's any problem in saying, "Oh, well, I'm not the best. Got some stuff going on that I need to deal with, whatever." But, most people, they don't want to hear your problems when they're asking how you're doing. So I understand why you'd say good. However, when I ask people how they're doing, I do hope that they look me dead in the eyes and they say awful. Use your discretion on that one, whether or not you want to answer completely honestly or just not. I always answer. Actually, I don't really answer at all. I don't answer that question. If someone asks me how I'm doing, I dodge the question at every cost possible. So if someone asks how you're doing, I think answering on, I just read that, didn't I? Yep, there you go. I'm droning. Generally, I don't think that small talk is awful. It's an okay way to keep a conversation with someone you don't care. It's an okay way to keep a conversation with someone that you don't care enough about to get to know better. Yeah, I mean, I wrote that pretty bluntly, didn't I? If nothing else, it's an okay way to get a conversation started. Yeah, I think it's fine. How are you is something that I genuinely ask everyone that I am going to start. Sometimes I don't. Generally, I ask that question and I want an honest answer. Usually, if I hear good, I'm going to ask them to elaborate. Once you've gotten a conversation started, it shouldn't be too hard to make it big talk, if that's the opposite of small talk. I don't know. Ask them about what they think happens after we die, maybe. I don't know. Don't do that. Honestly, I can't. Maybe you could if you want to. I'm sure I have. Honestly, I can't give that much advice on how to have a conversation. My method of communication is not at all normal and requires way too many variables that need to be considered in order to not be completely and utterly hated and shunned by the entire human populace. I ask really stupid questions. And not that they're always stupid, like just dumb questions, but a lot of times they're just way too personal, and I say some really dumb things really often. A little bit of stunted social growth at some point in my life made it so that I ask people really personal questions. A lot of times people do end up answering, and at the end of the day, when I give them like okay advice or like I comment in a way or I listen to them, like really listen, I think it ends up okay. It ends up fine, but it's generally not. I don't want to be the one to teach someone how to have a conversation, because no one should emulate conversation in the way that I do it. I also know how to recover from crossing a line if I do cross the line, which has happened. And I know what people will be willing to answer my questions and which people will be willing to answer my questions and which ones will think that I'm a psychopath. So in general, I can be weird in the right way, depending on who I'm talking to. Many years of mistakes leading to people not wanting to talk to me has taught me many, many lessons. But again, I'm as qualified to teach you how to conversation as my EM professor is to teach me about electromagnetic fields. So let's go ahead and call it, or not. because I wrote that I don't think I hit time, but I did hit time. I talked about a lot of extra stuff. That was really good. So that's all for this episode of Seriously Funny. Big thanks for listening. Please leave all of those reviews and whatnot. Hopefully by the time I'm recording this, my congestion is gone. That didn't happen, did it? I wrote that in a silent prayer to God, but he didn't answer. Maybe it's because of the whole God's not dead story thing. Maybe he really did not enjoy that, I don't know. But if it's not back, I'm going to be very sad. And let me tell you, I am very sad. But thanks again. Music, nothing. Anime, I started watching Classroom of the Elite Season 2, which is a little bit weird. Since I've read all the light novel and stuff, been a while since I read the light novel, but when I'm watching the anime and it's like, oh, I know what's going to happen, but I don't know. For like Spy X Family, I read the entire manga before I watched the anime, but for that one, I still loved watching the anime. I don't know, man. It's weird. It's just something. I'm only like 2 episodes in though, right? So nothing has like happened yet. Even though I know what's going to happen, kind of. I forgot what's going to happen, but I know the general thing. Anyways, thanks again. Much love. I will talk at you next week. I will record another episode in a day or two. Anyways, I'll talk to you again next week. Much love. Peace.